preliminary mission statement of the Cape Ann Climate Commission. Taking just a quick scan of that. That is the umbrella of why we're here. Macro. Okay. And to kick us off, I think to get us out of our heads, I actually want to put you right into your heads. Do you have a piece of paper that you received when you signed up? When you walked in the door? Do you have a writing utensil? If not, then you just have to sort of create it in your head. And I'm going to just start us off.
Are you going to introduce yourself?
I will.
Okay.
I will.
Thank you.
But there's your piece of paper, and in that zone in the middle, yours is probably grayed out, right? Is that true?
Yes.
It's just not showing up here well. So I'm going to give you a series of instructions, and when I do, that grayed out middle is out of bounds. You can't write in that. You can only write outside of that, okay? So, quadrant 1, top right. Here's what I'd like you to do, is simply split it into 2 equal parts. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. How many people think you've split it into 2 equal parts with a 1? You got it? Raise your hand. Let's test your metal. Does it look something like that? Yeah. Okay. Quadrant 2. Split it into 3 equal parts. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. How many people think you've got it? The numbers start to go down, but look, wow, this is a pretty, I'm not going to make you prove it, but it should look something like that. Does it? Yeah, okay. So here's where we're headed. The percentage of accuracy is going to go down significantly on option 3. I'm just warning you. So get your engineering brain in gear. Split quadrant 3 into 4 equal parts and begin.
Are we supposed to do it in one straight line?
No. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm not going to make you prove it, but how many people think you've got it? Okay, we got a few. Okay, the numbers went down, but let's take a look. Does it look like that? Okay, deep breath. Now, with what you've learned, right, what you know, I'd like you to break quadrant 4 into 5 equal parts. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and stop. How many people got it? Anybody? Just a couple.
I didn't draw it, but I have it in my head.
You have it in your head. Okay, so let's see how accurate you are. Does it look like that?
No.
Yes, a few people got it. Okay, but did some of you not get it? Look how simple. It's the easiest one. Okay, very quickly, what happened? What happened in your mind? You went from quadrant 3 to quadrant 4. It's the simplest one.
Yeah.
Why didn't you get it?
It
You weren't thinking that way. What else?
seemed too easy.
Too easy. How could it be that
There's
easy?
no intuitive way.
You just set us up for failure on the last one.
The last one was.
It's my fault, of course. Yes, I get that. Right. So good. Okay.
There's no intuitive way to split things into fifths.
So this is the sort of math way. Let me make this make sense for tonight. Making the needle move in managing climate change requires people to think differently. And some things aren't that freaking hard. Some things are quadrant 4. Tonight's quadrant 4. Right? Tonight's quadrant 4. And we like to make it like, it's too much. There's nothing we can do. That's not true. That's why you're here. Loved having you here. Thanks for playing. And so who am I? I'm totally insignificant for the evening, but I'm the process facilitator. I'm pro bono this evening. I do a ton of work in corporations. In fact, I've got a business card. One of the places that I do a lot of work with, we are launching a sustainability practice to help organizations shift to more sustainability. I'm a Cape Ann resident. I dipped in the ocean this morning, mountain bike this afternoon. I love being here and taking nature. What's really important is that we've got the Cape Ann Climate Coalition. We need you to lean in, ask questions, and we've got some amazing guest speakers who are going to provide a lot of information. That is meaningless to you. We have a cool agenda. We will end at 8:30. And I know at least one of the guest speakers, having had a chance to check in with Larry, are willing to stay a little bit afterwards for additional questions. Okay? And we have some really cool guests. So, in the meantime, I'd like to introduce, let me just take that up, Maureen Aylwood, who's here for our Town Green. That's right. Executive Director. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you also to the Cape Ann Climate Coalition for having me this evening. Thank you all for being here as well. It's really exciting to see a full house. And hopefully, we're going to have an inspiring evening, which I think we will, during which we will learn more about how we can electrify our homes, our businesses, and even begin to plan a purchase of an electric car. You will hear from our guest speakers, Revision Energy and the Green Consumers Energy Alliance, in a moment. And you're also going to hear from two representatives of the younger generation tonight. We certainly find ourselves in a changed local environment, especially this summer. Climate change is literally at our doorstep. It's in our backyards, here on Cape Ann. The heat wave and drought this summer affected us all. Weeks of high temperatures and high humidity, and nearly 2 months without consistent rainfall. I know I was praying for rain. Who else was praying for rain? We all were, right? I felt the pain of my garden wilting. My plants were drying out. My trees were under stress. And not to mention even the days that we weren't able to go outside because it was so hot, right? Drinking water supplies and rivers were at all-time lows. Air conditioners were cranked up, putting pressure on our power grid. But often with drought comes fire. Did we have fire in Cape Ann this summer? Ridiculous, right? The brush fires were difficult to extinguish in Rockport's Woodland Acres and in Gloucester's Poles Hill. And it was shocking to see the National Guard here helping us. And a Black Hawk helicopter pulling water right out of Babson Reservoir. Then Hurricane Ian last week, right? A Category 4 hurricane, 155-mile-an-hour sustained winds going right into Fort Myers and also Florida's west coast. Even 20 inches of rain fell in Orlando. And we've seen the pictures, we've seen that devastation. Cape Ann could and will experience dangerous storms in its future. Whether it's a hurricane or a snowy nor'easter, climate change is supercharging storms, and we need to be prepared for that to happen here. And I'm happy to say that Town Green will have a part in that, in helping our public understand what's ahead. There's a lot at stake here at Cape Ann. The good news is that we have the opportunity to make change that will impact our local climate change experience, because you know what? Climate change is local. Really. Climate change is global, but we experience it locally. And while we may not be able to stop many aspects of climate change, sea level rise, for instance, we can do our part. This great transition, what I also call the great energy transition, is going to call on all of us to do our part. And that means shifting to renewable energy sources. It means adapting to climate change, adapting to sea level rise. And most of all, making choices that will help us to be prepared for the climate change to come. We can do hard things. The writer Glennon Doyle likes to remind us of this. And I know that you will agree with me that Cape Ann is a place that can do hard things. We are resilient, and you hear a lot of the word resilience. Climate resilience, individual resilience in the face of climate change. We know how to do this, and I will say we know how to do things that will be climate resilient and energy resilient. What we can and need to do is move from being consumers to being green consumers, and from being citizens to being green citizens. How do we do that? Well, when faced with severe outdoor water restrictions this summer, many of us moved from being consumers of water to being water conservationists. Let's continue to conserve water in our daily routine and think about new ways to do this. When faced with severe drought, some of us started to think about ways to transition our lawns or gardens to drought-resistant gardens, maybe with native plantings. And while we did not have rolling blackouts due to the power grid failures, who didn't dream about having an off-the-grid renewable power supply like solar, right? We are faced with low heating fuel inventories in the Northeast this winter, projected to be 63% below the 5-year average, according to the Associated Press. And this is for a variety of reasons. As we know, the Ukraine war is one of those. And the recent release of Gloucester's Climate Action Resilience Plan states that nearly 26% of residents and businesses use fuel oil for heating. This information gives us the opportunity to be both green consumers and green citizens looking into alternatives to heating with oil. And we are going to consider, hopefully, installing heat pumps instead. There are affordable options to do this. We'll learn more about that tonight. We are faced this winter with a huge spike in natural gas prices, and perhaps $50 more per month for many residents to heat their homes with natural gas. Gloucester's Climate Action Resilience Plan states that 35.4% of residents and businesses use natural gas for heating. These rate increases will impact any homeowner or renter heating with natural gas, and green consumers and green citizens have an affordable opportunity to transition away from these fossil fuels. Heat pumps. National Grid is stating that electricity rates will increase 64% over last year's rates. Not in Gloucester, fortunately, because of municipal aggregation, but residents in the Cape Ann towns may also see significant increases. And the rate increase is because the electricity in our region is from natural gas-fired power plants. And this is also municipal solid waste incineration. But this comes on top of inflation and an energy marketplace that is in disarray. The smart green consumer and green citizen is planning to transition to electrifying everything in the home, especially putting solar panel on roofs or joining a community solar program, saving energy and planning for electric appliance purchases. Additionally, we are faced with the phase out of the combustion engine and really can see in our sights, and how exciting is this, the ushering in of electric cars, electric trucks, electric buses, trains, hopefully keep your fingers crossed on that one, right? And supply chain fleets. Green consumers and green citizens are learning about federal and state investments to create a nationwide EV charging station network that will have fast charging stations every 50 miles. Amazing. 5 years ago, we never thought that would happen. Our local municipalities have EV charging stations and could get more. And buying an electric car will become easier, as we'll hear from Larry tonight. Green consumers and green citizens can start taking actions to wean our homes, cars, businesses, rental properties off of fossil fuels today. Right now, tonight, we're going to learn about this. And it's how we can take action to make a difference in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which we all want to do, and this is one way we can do it. And it's how we build momentum towards a net zero household, to net zero businesses, net zero communities, and a net zero Cape Ann. Thank you very much. Right now, please join me in welcoming Kaya Graham to the front of the room. She's a 6-year-old climate activist from Gloucester. Please put it together for Kaya.
My name is Kaya Graham. I am really sad about climate change because the polar bears are dying. Their iceberg homes are melting. The water from the iceberg is making the ocean get bigger. And my home is next to the ocean. I love Gloucester. I have a plan. My room is on the second floor and has a secret entrance. We can climb out of my room and use boats to get around like they do in Venice. We bike a lot to use less energy. It's great, except in the winter. I think we should use horses in the winter to get to school. We can give them horse jackets to keep warm.
Super intimidating to follow her. So I'm like, a little nervous here, but I think I'll easily done. Our content expert tonight, Malcolm Sonnet, is here. He and I go way back to a 20-minute Zoom call, I think 2 days ago. But what I learned about Malcolm is he's a mechanical engineer by training. Sorry.
I'm the
But
same way.
he went off architecture, agriculture, then he thought, how do I take that off the grid? And then that sort of led him to where he is tonight, and he's going to be our heat pump, et cetera, et cetera. Malcolm, thanks again for being here tonight. There you go.
Thank you, Jane.
You bet.
Perfect. Hi again, I'm Malcolm with Revision Energy. We're a local solar and clean energy installer based in North Andover, but we're pushing nearly 20 years old in the region. So we were founded in Maine. We service New Hampshire as well. So we're one of, if not the oldest and most experienced clean energy installer in New England. Thrilled to be here. My goal tonight is to, take this inspiration. We've got the inspiration on one hand, arm you with knowledge, and meld that knowledge into action. And whether that's action that you all are taking in this room, or maybe more importantly, action that you're inspiring in others to take, your friends and neighbors, people who maybe don't even live in the state. So big picture, I want to talk about why are we focused on solar? Okay, why aren't we talking about tidal power or individual wind turbines in everyone's backyard? So I want to give you an idea of the scale of solar. We do that graphically. We show the finite energy reserves on the planet compared to the world energy use, that small orange ball there. And then we can stack up the renewable energy sources apart from solar here. And you can see, we have the potential worldwide to get all the energy we need from wind, for example. That circle is bigger than this circle. Wait for it. There's the potential of solar in delivering power to the earth. It's a matter of capturing it, of course, and distributing it. To bring this down a little more zoomed in from the earth, the world energy needs could be met with solar panels installed in that small area in that sunny location of the Sahara compared to what's currently being produced by solar. Bringing it a little closer to home to New England, how many people expected that New England has a good solar resource? Is that common, or do you think of cloudy, crummy ocean weather? Well, in fact, latitudinally, New England is right on par with the French Riviera, sunny, beautiful French Riviera. So the solar potential is quite tremendous. In fact, New England receives 33% more solar potential than Germany. Many may not know this, but Germany is the world leader in solar deployment. So they're sitting there with 33% less potential, but they've made the investment, largely geopolitical, to separate themselves and be independent from other countries' energy sources. So why electrify? It's about emissions. So here, especially New England, colder climates, about a third of our energy use is going towards our heating. About another third is going towards our hot water. Those are traditionally done through combustion with high emissions. On the right, you're seeing renewable forms of heating with the grid currently at 12% renewable concentration. So you can imagine as that percentage of renewable energy delivered to the grid increases, the emissions from those heating sources dramatically decreases. So we're going to talk about a couple things tonight, mainly rooftop solar, and then for you're going to find there's a small fraction of people probably in this room who would even have potential on their homes. So the alternative to not be defeated by that is community solar, which is accessible to everyone. So that's what we really want to dig into. Photovoltaics, that's the definition of solar power that we deal with. So 20 years ago, we were doing solar hot water systems. We were heating water with the sun. We were bringing it down to the house through expensive plumbing and a storage tank in the basement, and that was helping to offset hot water needs. Today, we can produce electricity incredibly reliably. These systems last for 25 years, bare minimum. No moving parts, no maintenance. And the real key is with that electricity being produced on the roof, this is the vision of the household of the future. The umbrella of clean electricity production then powers all of these different appliances in the home, from electric heat pump for heating and cooling, electric water heating, your cooktops and all your small appliances. I probably won't touch much on those, but all of those by default are lighting. Electric vehicle charging, which Larry's going to get into later on, and then battery storage to replace a generator. So the technology is there, it's proven, it's cost effective for these appliances to be slowly replaced based on what makes sense at what time to switch a house entirely from a fossil fuel dependent home. So that's the key, right? We're talking about reducing our dependency on sources of fuel that just don't make any sense. You saw the first graph with just the scale of what is there and finite versus what is infinite. And so moving away from those finite resources means we're not dependent on volatility, supply chain issues, and that sort of thing. Zooming into how solar works, just very quickly, solar panels on a roof, they're going to produce sun when the sun shines. We're talking about here, this is a grid-tied system. So my work in off-grid water pumping is for remote locations, and a lot of people think of solar, okay, I'm severing with the grid, I hate paying my electric bill, I'm gonna throw that in the fireplace, and I'm off-grid, baby. That's not the reality. So the reality is the grid is actually helpful to be connected to, and we can contribute to its cleanliness and also benefit from its reliability and its interconnectivity. So a common example, this is how 99% of solar systems are designed today. Panels produce, sunlight produces electricity when it hits the panels. That electricity flows off the roof and it goes into your main electric panel where electricity comes from the grid currently. Electricity wants to go the path of least resistance. So if there are lights on in the house when the sun is shining, those solar electrons are physically going to go through your light bulbs and power anything on in the house, all of your electronics, all of your anything demanding electricity. Now here's the neat part. Because it always goes the path of least resistance, anytime there's real-time surplus, more solar that can be consumed in the house, that energy is going to get pushed out automatically to the rest of the grid. On its way out of your home, it spins the meter the opposite way. And that meter has to get upgraded as part of the solar project, but that's the magic of solar here in National Grid in Gloucester, is the arrangement of what's called net metering. So you have your billing period the same as you do now, a monthly billing period, but you're going to have one of two outcomes. Either you owe them money because there's a deficit and solar didn't cover your entire monthly usage, or they owe you a credit that can be rolled over to next month, so that this is a seasonal seasonal phenomenon where solar in surplus months, most of the time it's in your shoulder seasons where your heating and cooling aren't so onerous. This is a perfect time of year. It's cool, it's sunny, panels are producing tremendously. a lot of that solar in a given month might be exported to the grid. It's going to get rolled over and it's going to be able to be used up in the wintertime months when your electricity is spiking from electric heating. How about solar potential? So we're going to dive into, this is a pretty neat free website. It's called Google Project Sunroof. It's a very neat way to visualize solar potential on roofs. It unfortunately doesn't cover all of Gloucester. This is Beverly. And so you can see big flat roof. It's, you know, probably a 2 or 3 story building. It's above the height of the trees. That's going to get sun all day long, all year long. A house tucked in the trees. You know, there you might get some morning light part of the year. You might get afternoon light part of the year. Overall, sometimes not a great site. And the other thing that makes a great site is, of course, roof pitch. The angle relative to zero. So pointing out the obvious here, which side of the roofs are the sunniest? Okay, everybody knows that. Cool. We've got a very tenured crowd here. So when you see these roofs in the purple and dark orange, when we think about a good solar roof, we're thinking about a nice big rectangle, right? So sun hits a lot of these roofs to varying degrees. A hip roof is really not something that's most likely going to be viable. So when we think about a solar project, you're building a power plant on your roof, you're investing dollars to do this construction project. Is that going to yield, is that going to make sense as an investment? And so the solar investment that makes the most sense is where you can put a large quantity of panels in a very sunny roof plane. Example being, these are your ideal roofs. And the one on the right you can see is actually a Rockport project. New construction. Half of the house was designed to be very architecturally interesting, not friendly to solar, but part of it was carved off intentionally to be sort of the power plant for the house. And you can see how nicely those panels are arranged to fit on that space. So that's a home that's designed to fit for solar. So that's really what we're looking for, right? The house of 7 gables is never going to be solar potential. And putting solar on every rooftop is not the answer, and it's not feasible. But that's the whole beauty of this next piece, which is community solar. We don't need solar on every rooftop. We need solar on the good rooftops. And so my hope, what gives me promise, is the idea that if this becomes common understanding, which it sounds like I'm speaking to a room of people who get this, you may live in a purple house, you may live in the house of 7 gables, you may live in a cape with dormers and a couple panels here, a couple panels there. It's really not going to cut it. But when you go to a dinner party at your friend's house and you look up and you say, we're due south here, and this is a wide open roof, then there's the nudging, the education, the dominoes start to fall, and more people start to just be aware of this kind of thing. I think of it very similar to, Jane mentioned a background in agriculture. I think of it like the local food movement, right? Until recently, many people were not even thinking about this. My food comes from the grocery store, right? My meat comes from the meat section, my produce comes from the produce section. When we start to understand where does our food actually come from, there's an interest and there's a desire to care about that. And I think the same is we're starting to get there with energy. Where does your energy come from? The wires on the street, right? But if we track that back and we bring that closer to home, now we're producing energy in the state or in individual rooftops. So rooftop solar, it's an investment. It's not a dramatic dollar savings in the short term. It is a long-term smart investment. The idea being illustrated here. So whether outright ownership of the panels through a cash purchase or using a loan to own the panels, so ownership still, but a loan structure. the structure of the loan is set up to be such that a reduced electric bill is replaced with a loan payment such that there's really not much difference month to month in your monthly cash flow. But there is an end in sight, unlike continuing to pay that portion of electricity to the grid, where we're seeing 64% increases in the next 2 months, and long term, no end in sight, essentially. So what if, again, back to you live in the purple, or you live in a sunny spot, but very small potential. Whatever the reason that rooftop solar doesn't make sense, the alternative here is community solar farm. So the way this works is a large solar farm can be built in the same utility as your home, and just like with the rooftop solar where surplus can be rolled over to next month's as credits, the same thing can be done with community solar. This solar generation, as long as it is connected to the same utility, is going to be virtually sent to your account. The value of that solar production in a perfect field, prime return on investment, is going to be sent to your account and offset your bill. Most of Massachusetts is going to be not an ownership model, but a subscription-based model, where you sign up for X number of panels based on the electricity needs that you have, and that value of energy is sent to your account at a reduced cost. So you see that 5 to 10% electric bill savings. They might be able to send, $500 worth of electricity for $450 to you, if that makes sense. So I know Cape Ann Climate Commission has a lot more resources on community solar, how to sign up. There's many different vendors. I don't believe there are any ownership models in Massachusetts. Just land competition is a little bit too great, and we do this in New Hampshire and Maine, true ownership solar farm models. And hopefully that is the future here when we start looking at large warehouse rooftops and those underutilized parking garages and spaces like that. So we don't have to carve up land to create this. Now back to household uses of electricity and efficient ways to heat and cool. How many folks were at the last presentation on heat pumps? All right, good. All right, so we know what they are. We have one here on the wall. Anybody else notice that when they walked in? Yeah, so this is the perfect space for a heat pump. Wide open, with the investment of this installation, it can heat and cool this space fairly effortlessly. When we talk about an outdoor unit and indoor unit revision, I'm going to pare this down specifically to ductless heat pumps, the most efficient way to deliver that heat to a space as opposed to pushing it all through ductwork. But what's crucial to understand about heat pumps in the context of affordable ideas to take action, right? A lot of people will get up against this hurdle of, I have this existing system, you're telling me I have to rip it all out and I have to replace it all with one of these in every room, or a ducted system that distributes that air. And that is where my background and our approach specifically kind of works in that, it goes hand in hand with that affordable action. So you can see just in this room, there are forced hot water heat as a backup, and the mini split becomes the primary source of heat until such time that it can't keep up due to maybe it's undersized for the space, or it's sized efficiently for the space. It's not sized for the coldest night of the year. The existing infrastructure stays, and the investment is just for the for as few zones as is needed. That's really our approach. So looking kind of at these economics, long-term economics of a heat pump project and the corresponding reduction in carbon emissions. So here's an example of a complex 3-zone project. So a zone being any space that an indoor unit can serve. So this might be, we're looking at, a couple spaces on the main floor and maybe a primary bedroom. So we're looking at the areas you spend the most amount of time in your house, and that's going to correspond to the most offset of your existing fossil fuel. Natural gas currently is one of the more inexpensive ways to heat. I don't think that's going to last, but showing kind of side by side business as usual heating with natural gas for a space that 3 zones would offset, the grid electricity costs to run the heat pump investment, and then the next column is showing if that electricity to run the heat pump was coming from rooftop solar, how dramatically less the long-term investment is. And of course, on the right, the long-term impact of the carbon emissions. The example is much nicer with oil, and this is also another example of a simpler heat pump project, which is the one to really think about pursuing. 1 or 2 zones. So this is an example of a 2-zone home with a large open floor plan where 2 zones can virtually eliminate the existing oil, and again, long-term costs of business as usual, heat pump with grid electricity, and heat pump powered by solar. Now that same heat pump technology can be used to heat water as well. So this would be a tank that lives in your basement. It scoops up ambient air in the basement and injects that heat through the same magic of a heat pump. So when you all did the deep dive in heat pumps, you probably learned this phenomenon of how are we getting heat out of 5-degree air. The same magic is happening here where a 60-degree basement has enough heat in it to create 110-degree shower water. So you get some side benefits of slightly dehumidifying the basement, et cetera. And this is just one of the the most efficient way to heat water. Running costs are minuscule, and carbon emissions 0. And then the last piece to the all-electric home, electric vehicle charging. So this is where you're taking money that would have been in the gasoline bucket, putting it into the electricity bucket, driving on pennies a mile. And Larry's going to give us a little bit more about the vehicle side of things, but electric vehicle charging, very simple infrastructure. Here we're showing the level 2 chargers at our office, but virtually every new electric vehicle is going to come with a 110 plug. You're ready to go out of the box to start charging away. So ideal roof for solar. If you don't have that, community solar is a great option too. Get started today. Talk to your friends about it. We can do this. That's all I have. Yes.
So can you run your heat pumps through your existing duct system?
There's, ducted heat pumps, definitely, yeah. So these are very flexible. This is an indoor unit that connects to an outdoor unit. The outdoor unit is all the muscle, right, but it can be flexibly connected through refrigerant lines to various delivery methods.
If you have a current stuck gas system, you could actually have the heat pump run, and then if it got too cold, then the gas would...
Yeah, so that's called a 2-stage furnace. That's very common in new construction to have a heat pump as the primary down to a certain temperature because they're very sensitive about the economics running, but you can change that set point temperature because these things today are capable of heating down to -13 degrees. And so you can have heat pump only when it's sized appropriately, or you have maybe supplemental electric baseboard heat in some of the nooks and crannies. That's a typical strategy we take. The bathroom heat has to be addressed a little bit. Yeah.
If I want you to evaluate my house, what do? Call the number you had up there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. You can call our North Andover office. We take a look from the sky, very much like the Google Project Sunroof, and we're gonna.
Oh, I have solar panels.
Oh, I see. For heat pumps.
I'm strictly talking about heat pumps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so we can talk over the phone and kind of get an idea, and then see things in person. Yep. Yeah.
You do houses of worship?
Yes, depending on the space. So something like this is very much like a residential, a residential application. I looked at a job recently in Amesbury, big, huge, incredibly vaulted, looking for air conditioning specifically with a bunch of people huffing and puffing in the middle of summer. Probably not the best, at least not for us in our kind of residential focus.
So you're mostly focused on residential?
That's right. And small commercial, yeah.
And Malcolm, you
Yep.
said you could stay a little bit after?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to stay after and chat. Yep.
Because we have another guest speaker that we must hear from, but I haven't met her yet. Leah Rinn, freshman at Gloucester High School. Is she in the house? There you are. Hi, of course I saw you in the first row. Welcome, and glad to have you here.
Hello. My name is Leah Rinn. Ever since I was little, I've known about climate change in one way or another, whether it was the turtles dying or the gas from our cars burning holes through our atmosphere. And one of my first role models was Greta Thunberg. Climate change has been important to me for the longest time. When I was 10, my mom helped me make posters for Earth Hour. You choose an hour of the day where you completely unplug and shut off all electricity. And we hung them up around town. When I was 11, I would rewatch the Greta Thunberg TED Talk and later participated in the climate strike in Boston. The scientists told us we had 11 months to make necessary changes before the harm was irreversible. While we made progress, it wasn't enough. Now more than 2 years later, we're here and I'm almost 15 years old. I hope to one day go to college and study law or psychology. One day I hope to have a big house and a big family. I have lots of hopes, I think we all do. But my biggest one is to be cautious enough, smart enough, and kind enough to make sure I do my part and keep our planet clean and healthy as much as it's possible, so one day my kids don't have to stand up in front of people more than twice their age, telling them about what they have to go through and grow up in because of their careless actions some 30 years ago. Sure, science wasn't as evolved back when you all were growing up, but it is now, at least enough for us to understand what changes need to happen. I'm 14, and I know what changes need to happen. So please do me a favor and act on those changes. Make things happen. I'm too young to go and lead projects on this unless I put my whole 24 hours of each day into it. But you all have the advantage of time and age, and with that comes responsibility and knowledge. So use it and help us save our planet, starting with our town. Our town is said to be a beach town, which it very much is. Clear blue waters and gorgeous green parks and beautiful harbors sparkling with sunlight. Tourists love it here. And because we house almost double our population for 4 months a year, it's only fair for us to keep it beautiful like it should be. For instance, the harbors are filled with trash and oil. Corners of downtown neglected with litter scattered about through bushes and dirt. It needs to be fixed fast. It doesn't have to be something huge too. We could start by putting trash bins by the docks so the ocean doesn't get filled with more plastic. Or a simple walk down the beach or through the woods picking up whatever trash you find. More solar-based energy sources, or more reusable straws, shopping bags, and cups. If there's one thing I've learned, you make a mess, you clean it. Starting with our own town, it's more than just an option.
Now we're going to talk automobiles, I think.
Yes.
So, Larry Cretion, Executive Director of Green Energy Consumer Alliance. So, super honored to have you take your evening to be with us. So, thank you so much, Larry. And what I've learned in prepping for this session is that the municipal aggregation that we're already doing, right, with some power, was Larry who's brought that to us. So, he's already had an impact on Cape Ann. People care.
Yeah.
So thank you. And,
Thank you.
Look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you, Jane. What a beautiful city. I had a great meal a little while ago at the studio. It's just lovely walking up and down the street as well. You're going to save a lot of money this winter because of aggregation, and we're very happy about that. Greta Thunberg is a hero of mine as well. So tonight I'm going to talk about how you can drive green, and it's going to have connections. Everything's connected to everything else, so everything that Malcolm talked about will apply to what we're talking about. So we're going to cover the state of the EV market, electric vehicles, state and federal incentives, the cost of running a car on electricity in maintenance, and then a little bit about cars coming soon. But it's not just cars, as somebody said, it was trucks, it's buses, it's going to be ferries, it's going to be airplanes to some extent. So an electric car is cool, an electric bus is cooler, and the coolest thing you can ever imagine is an electric school bus. If you're in the market for an EV, I got some good news and bad news for you. The Inflation Reduction Act is going to make it possible for us all to have affordable EVs in time. I would say in 2030, we're going to look back and we're going to say that was an awesome piece of legislation in 2022. But for the next year or two, it's going to I'm going to tear my hair out, and so will you. We have a supply chain problem that stems from COVID. Then the war in Ukraine by the invasion by Russia is messing things up in a big time. And so almost all products, but particularly cars, not just EVs, but internal combustion engines, as you've probably heard, it's a bad time if you need a car. And even used vehicle prices are skyrocketing. And so if you want an EV, almost regardless of the make and model, you're probably going to have to order it. And you're going to have to wait. That seems that there are very few dealers, including some big dealers we know of, that have many cars on their lot. And so sometimes even a dealer that does a lot of business might even have one that you can test drive. A couple of years ago, we helped a lot of people save money purchasing a car through our program called Drive Green. Look it up at greenenergyconsumers.org/drivegreen. And we were helping people save thousands of dollars. But right now, there's just not enough inventory, so the car makers are actually charging above the manufacturer's suggested retail price. And it's going to take a couple of years for that to work out. I think we'll get back to the point where we can save people a lot of money down the future. Right now, we're trying to explain to you what your options are. So it's going to take a little more time and research. You might have to put $500 or $1,000 or something like that on with your pre-ordering. It's usually refundable. You should make sure you get that. And again, be prepared to pay over the MSRP. Massachusetts has a program called More EV. It's a state incentive. It's not a tax credit. It's a rebate that you have to apply for. It has some rules to it. Right now, you can get $2,500 for buying an all-electric vehicle like the Chevrolet Bolt or the Nissan Leaf or maybe a Tesla Model 3. If it's a plug-in hybrid, that's one that has a battery that you plug it in. It's not a hybrid like the old Toyota Prius, but if you plug it in, but it also has a gas tank and a gas engine. The purchase price of those, in order to get it, has to be $50,000 or less. And so there's some cars are below that, but usually Tesla Model 3s, sometimes you can get one under 50. Not so much these days, usually they're over 50. Leased vehicles, if you're going to lease, you can still get the rebate, but it has to be a 36-month lease. And it has to be purchased and leased from a Massachusetts dealership. So even if you could get a good deal from another state, which you really can't, you would not be able to get the rebate, which makes sense. And basically, you have to fill out a little bit of paperwork to prove that you got the car and it costs less than $50,000, and then the state will mail you a check. There's also a program for trucks. So that's for vehicles over 8,500 pounds. Rebate starts at $7,500. So this is a good move. This is all about, the bigger the truck, more likely it is to burn on diesel. And that's very bad for public health. Gasoline's bad for public health, but diesel is worse. And so we want to see this happen, particularly all kinds of delivery vehicles, commercial vehicles, a lot of public fleets. You want your city and town to look at these options. The federal tax credit. I'll say this again, the Inflation Reduction Act It's a wonderful thing. The term game changer is often overused. It is a game changer. It deserves that credit. We are going to put the United States on the path towards reducing greenhouse gases on the order of what we're supposed to because of this bill. But a lot of the provisions are going to kick in over time. I don't know if you followed the politics of it all. I pretty much gave up hope that it was going to pass the United States Senate, and then Biden and Senator Schumer kind of pulled the rabbit out of their hat. They got Senator Manchin from West Virginia to negotiate, but he drove a very hard bargain. And so he isn't crazy about electric vehicles. He said if you want tax credits for electric vehicles, they're going to put some conditions on it because he doesn't want us buying materials from countries like China. So get ready for the complexity. Effective August 16th, the day that the president signed it, you can get a $7,500 tax credit on an EV, but it depends upon, it has to be made in final assembly in North America, and it will depend upon the battery size of the vehicle, and you have to have a tax liability of $7,500. If you owed $5,000 in your taxes, they're not going to write you a check for $2,500. You'll get a tax credit of $5,000. And the old provision was that it still will exclude General Motors and Tesla. Why? Because they were successful. They made over 200,000 electric vehicles, and the old law said that once you pass that number, your car would not be eligible for a tax credit. Kind of dumb. So what they've changed it to a clean vehicle credit, okay? And it has a lot of provisions. I didn't write this, I'm just explaining it, okay? Starting for January 1st, 2023 and going for essentially 10 years, there will be no more $200,000 cap. So now Tesla and General Motors are back in the game, and the other car makers, when they start making cars, they won't have to worry about having their tax credit expire after they reach 200,000. So now this will create more competition, which is a good thing. There are income requirements. If you make over $300,000 and you file jointly, you cannot get the tax credit. If you're an individual filer, your income can't be over $150,000. Our organization supports that. If you have more money than that, you don't really need a federal tax credit. And the fuel cell vehicles are now included. Don't buy one. They were the vehicle of the future 20 years ago, and they always will be. Electric vehicles have just surpassed them in terms of technology. And there will be applications for fuel cells in other places, but not in the car you're going to need for around here. And good luck finding it. If you think it's hard finding an electric vehicle charging station, try to find one with hydrogen. Now there are new vehicle requirements in order to qualify. Okay, Joe Manchin at work here. The final assembly has to be in North America. I'm okay with that, but that's going to limit how many cars qualify right away in 2023. I can tell you right now there are billions of dollars of announcements of being made. There are factories being put up all over the United States, mainly in red states, which is weird, but they are being huge factories to build electric cars. So very soon there'll be a lot of makes and models that will qualify there. The price cap, now there are new price caps, which we also support. $80,000 for an SUV or pickup or van, $55,000 for sedan and hatchback. Again, if you can pay more for a car, you don't really need the federal tax credit. That's my opinion. And it kicks in on January 1st of 2023. But the batteries, the minerals in the batteries and the other battery component requirements also kick in, but every year the percentage of those materials that are going to be considered acceptable for the tax credit are going to ratchet up. So they're going to make the car makers work harder and harder to earn the tax credit. So here we go. 40%, starting in January 1st, 40% of the battery's minerals by value must be mined or processed in North America or a country with a free trade agreement with the United States or recycled in the United States. So what they're trying to say is, right now, right away, no more than 60% of the battery materials could come from China, for example, okay? And then every year, that percentage we can get from China is going to go down, as an example. And that qualifies you for half of the $7,500. So that's just $3,750 for that. The battery components, the value of the components manufactured or assembled in North America must be at least 50% of the battery value. And so these things, I know it's confusing, but they add up to $7,500. And that's what's going to have, that the percentages are going to ramp up every year. So it's going to get harder and harder. The bar is going to get higher. The point I'm getting at, on January 1st, 2023, and for some time, there will be many cars that qualify today that will not qualify in 2023. So that's not good, right? If you're looking for an electric car, at least you can still get an electric car. They'll be available. You just may not get the tax credit, okay? So what we do think is it's still a pretty hot year. Higher priced EVs are selling pretty well. If you can afford that, very good. I'd rather see you drive a high-priced electric vehicle than a gasoline-powered car. Now, for the first time, the feds are going to give a used vehicle tax credit. The battery requirements will not apply. It's up to $4,000 or 30% of the sales price. You have to buy it from a dealership, meaning you can't buy mine. You'd have to get it from a dealer. And the car must be at least 2 years old and cost less than $25,000. So this is a good way of trying to make EVs affordable. So if I trade in my electric car in order to get a new one, then the dealership can take that car and sell it to somebody who maybe can't afford a brand new car. So it's a good thing. It only applies to the first resale. The income thresholds are half of what the new car thresholds were. $150,000 for joint filers, $75,000 for an individual filer. Not sure if there's a slide here. I'm working with someone else's slide deck, but Massachusetts state rebate is also going to, in 2023, will also have something for used cars as well. And so we supported that very heavily. We did some lobbying for that, and we're glad to have it. So in terms of charging your car, these are different kinds of connections. This J1772 is, if you have one that's a level 1, as Malcolm said, that's the kind of service you have in your house. You can plug it right into an exterior outlet in your house, or even run it through a window if you had to. And that will charge your car. It's 2 to 6 miles of range per hour, which isn't a lot, but the average car might only go less than 40 miles a day. A lot of people can get by with that. What many of us have is a level 2 charger. That, I know that's the kind that Revision Energy and others would install. I have one of those. That charges quite a bit faster. It's 220 volts, 11 to 25 miles per range per hour. That's actually the newer EVs, you can charge faster with a level 2. And that's plenty. So how long does it take to charge my car? I'm driving from Quincy. I use about 90 miles. It takes me 3 seconds. I get out of the car, I plug in the car, and I go to bed. And so it'll give me 90 miles of charge in about 3 hours. So then CHAdeMO, that's kind of going out of vogue. That's for a Nissan Leaf and some Asian cars, but they're moving towards the kind of system that we have with most electric cars. There's a thing called DC fast charging that allows you much faster. My car is the fast charge is 90 miles in 30 minutes. That's slow compared to a lot of new cars. You can get it when you're on a road trip. You can usually do much faster than that. And that speed is getting faster and faster all the time, both at the charging station and with the new cars. All of us you can get a charging guide at our website. You go to greenenergyconsumers.org, drive green, and we have a lot of information on charging. Those of us who have an electric car carry around an app on our phone, an app called PlugShare or ChargePoint. There are others as well that tell me where all the charging stations are. I didn't need to charge coming here to Gloucester, but the map would tell me where I could if I had to. On the issue of charging fuel costs on a per mile basis, before National Grid just raised its electricity rates, charging a car on electricity is about the equivalent of $2.20 or $2.25 a gallon. So the more you drive an electric car, the more you're going to save compared to driving an internal combustion engine car. Even with the national grid's rates, it's still cheaper to run a car on electricity than on oil. Should have a slide, but as Malcolm said, the maintenance on an electric car is pretty damn low. I take my car in to get a sticker, and I have them rotate the tires once a year. And that's all I've had a car EV since 2014. The 10 things that cost you the most on an internal combustion engine to repair and maintain don't exist in an electric car. And so anyone who has a fleet, that's why you're seeing Hertz, that's why you're seeing all the major fleet vehicles, you're seeing Amazon, and you see is because the cost of maintenance is so much less. It makes perfect economic sense. And so you need to apply that to yourself. How often do you want to take your gas-powered car to get it fixed? You'd much rather have an electric car. You're going to save a lot of money on maintenance and on gasoline. A lot of new cars coming soon. I don't have a comprehensive list because of the time here, but VW is making the Buzz. It's going to be electric cars. It's in Europe now. Europe has a lot of cars that we don't have yet, but we're going to see them soon. The Rivian's got a pickup truck. Ford 150 Lightning is already available. People have ordered it, are waiting on it. In about a year, you're going to see Chevy is going to come out with Chevy Silverado, which is a competitor to the 150 that's electric. Chevy's also coming out in about a year with Chevy Equinox, which is a mid-size SUV, a Chevy Blazer. Ford's got the Mach-E. They're going to keep coming out with new makes and models. Just about every car maker is now spending more money developing electric cars than gasoline-powered cars. So, if you want an electric Volkswagen, they'll be there for you. If you have predilections towards a certain make and model, it'll be there for you soon enough. And of all types. You want a compact car, that'll be there for you. An SUV, a pickup truck, what have you. So the sedans, the wide range of things. I'm not a patient person, but if we could try to be patient, these cars are being made. It's all about a bit of the supply chain issue. Remember the chip shortage? You heard about that? Well, there's a new law. There's chip factories being built. That's going to happen. But basically, that's what's happening is the car makers are just allocating their chips to, quite frankly, right now, the cars where they can make the most money. Within a couple of years, when the chips come in greater supply, we'll start seeing more cars being made. And it'll be across the board. Just about every car maker is come to the conclusion that they have to switch to electric, and they're sort of setting dates. Sometimes they're announcing them at some point they will not be making any more gasoline-powered cars. Final point, I guess, is Massachusetts is going to follow suit of California. We're going to adopt a rule that they have. January 1st, 2035, you will not be able to buy a new gasoline-powered car in Massachusetts. And the car makers are over between now and 2035. Every year they're going to have a higher percentage of their sales will have to be electric. So you're going to start seeing, that will also drive the supply of electric cars to us, because if they want to sell a car in 2030, 68% of the cars they sell will have to be electric. So the transition's happening. You can make it happen faster by whatever you do. Don't buy another gasoline-powered car unless it's used, and then you can trade it in for when the electric car comes to be that you're looking for. And we have a lot of events coming up. Go to our events page, and a lot of webinars, some outdoor events, that sort of thing. You can send questions to Drive Green. Thank you very much. That's it.
So we have 15 minutes to ask questions. And Malcolm, come on up.
So I had a conversation at work with some colleagues about electric cars, and I hear a lot about, what do you do with the batteries? Where are these batteries going to go once the car is through its use life, its life and all that? So how do you explain that?
I love that question because the EV batteries are lasting longer than they projected. Nissan has put out more electric cars than just about anybody in the world. Some of the Nissan Leafs that have been around a long time, and they've replaced very few. So a couple things are going to happen. At some point, the battery might degrade to the point where it can't really push the car around real well. That's probably going to be 15 years in most cases. Tesla and General Motors are saying kind of the same thing. At the point at which maybe it's degraded a little bit and you can probably get that battery removed, it'll have value. And it's not going to go into a landfill. It's going to have a second life. It's going to be used as stationary storage, which is what we need to balance the grid in the future as we add more and more wind and solar. Malcolm was showing a picture of they install storage at your house. In the future, you're going to start seeing 15 years from now, some homes are going to install storage in someone's home from maybe the battery that is in my car today. And then beyond that, it's getting to the point where it's almost 100% recyclable. And in their fact, right now there's more recycling capacity in the United States than there are batteries to recycle. So we're ahead of that curve. So it's oftentimes an engineer will ask that question. The answers are usually pretty well dealt with. Yeah.
Sure.
First, a comment, which I made to you earlier. Thank goodness for mechanical engineers, because if you didn't have them, you wouldn't have these heat pump systems. So thank goodness for them. On a positive note. Why'd you do this? So I have a boiler, oil-fired boiler that's end of life. It's like 30 years old and things are starting to go wrong with it. I also have some heat pumps in my home. They're unfortunately not the low temperature ones. They're the standard, I guess, which are good to maybe 15 degrees ambient or something like that. So I'm trying to make decisions on what direction to go. Should I invest in a new boiler as a backup to these systems, or should I go to getting a new, I think, condensing unit that'll allow me to go to a lower outdoor ambient?
Right, a new outdoor condenser.
That'll allow me to go to a lower ambient.
That's definitely a possibility, swapping that outdoor unit. You'd have to look at, I always ask people to get quotes for repairing the boiler. I mean, I'm not a boiler tech, but it's
been repaired.
Has it? Yeah. I mean, so big picture, there's nothing sophisticated about the way a boiler works, right? It's like a glorified wood stove. It just happens to heat water. But you have a burner and a box, and so I would repair that as long as you can, and then, weighing, oftentimes when that boiler gets to end of life and you're looking at, okay, that's a sunk cost, or do I add heat pumps? Usually the answer is I'm going to add heat pumps, or in your case, improve the capacity and perhaps add to the nooks and crannies that aren't already served. Another overlooked option is, we're all a little bit skittish about electric baseboard, right? That was the cheap heat of the 70s. We think of it as that's inefficient. In fact, it is 100% efficient. It's more efficient than your boiler. It's more efficient than a condensing gas boiler. It's just back to the inputs. The cost of a unit of electricity to get that unit of heat is more than the unit of cheap oil right now, but that goes back up to $6 a gallon. And electric baseboard to just hit the nooks and crannies or keep you warm on that 0 degree night, that's oftentimes a better solution.
So I'm watching the questions. We have one here, and then we have one in the back. Did you pass on yours? And then
No,
we have one in the back. We'll get you second. Is that okay?
I was wondering, when you were talking about federal credits for the vehicles, do the feds offer credit for hybrids as well, or just EVs?
Plug-in cars. So that's the essential what we're looking for. It has to plug in. So it could either be an all-electric car with just a battery, no gasoline engine, or it could be a car that plugs in and is what's called a plug-in hybrid. You plug it in to have a battery that might take you on a range of, say, 50 miles on a range, and then it's also got a gasoline engine. And so that will work for a while. Hate to put it to you, but we can't meet our carbon goals with hybrids. We've got to plug them in.
Gentleman in the back, yes.
I've been looking at Rockport in terms of the usage right now in terms of how much power we're using, electric power. And thinking, okay, we started putting solar on a lot of rooftops, you know, what that might do. And maybe some wind power out on the islands and et cetera. But the real unknown in this whole thing is how fast people are going to convert from fossil fuels in their houses to heat pumps and electric cars. If that all happened in a very short period of time, which it won't, it's going to put a tremendous demand on the grid. And my question is, where the hell are we going to get all the power on the grid to make it possible to make these transitions? Because it's a tremendous increase. California's bumping up against it right now.
I think we can both answer that question. I think we both have something to say on that one. Our organization's working very hard to try to encourage Massachusetts and other New England states to bring on offshore wind. There's a resource there that is mind-blowing, and we've got a number of projects that are coming in. 10 years from now, most of our power meeting Massachusetts needs will come from offshore wind, perhaps some from Canada, some from Maine, but I'm convinced that we're going to build the renewable energy resources faster than the EVs and heat pumps are going to come on. The issue here is the legislature can sort of make the utilities buy the renewable energy for us. We've got to convince you to buy, every one of you to buy heat pumps and cars for your home, and that's going to take a while.
Yeah, not much to add there other than, you know, the sort of the boring answer of, you know, these investor-owned utilities, right? It's the large-scale, utility-scale projects that are going to help that we don't really have a part in other than voting for people who, you know, make sure the DPU is holding utilities accountable. You know, another piece of that problem is just the infrastructure, right? We've got, when you start increasing the demand, and that's what you're seeing in California too, is substations need to be upgraded, transformers need to be upgraded, and you know, they're not planning for that. So it's a real challenge.
In cities where they have their own metropolitan power plant, at what scale do people do that now? Do they do that now with sustainable energy?
There's all kinds of different models around the world where some cities and towns, even 40 cities and towns in Massachusetts, own the electricity. They don't have National Grid or Eversource. Danvers, I think, right? Peabody and others. And so that's often done. But I think the Inflation Reduction Act has also got some incentives in there for energy systems to be owned and operated by tax-exempt entities, such as nonprofit organizations, cities and towns. You don't have to be a municipal utility. You can get the equivalent of tax credits from that. So I think we can open up our eyes to many different methods.
Right, and keep in mind those are, you know, those municipal light departments, they're not producing all that power within the town. They're just producing on paper the amount of power that they're delivering to their network from outside sources. And so that can be natural gas piped up from the Gulf of Mexico, burned in a station somewhere.
I know, that's why I'm asking, was sustainable.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, so them going out and finding these supply contracts for clean power is essential.
Hi, Dick.
So I just want to say that Town Green 3-4 years ago had a plan to do a microgrid using O'Malley solar, both the roof, the rink, and the parking lot. And we were going to do this as a direct line to the first responders, including the hospital. And what we got right down to the finish line, but what hit us was the net metering cap, because the windmills are taking the net metering cap. Now I understand that Massachusetts has double that cap, right? So we're planning to go back to this plan and have a net metering, a microgrid that would do that, or it could be larger if we go and expand the solar footprint throughout Cape Ann, which we know we have the capability to do technically. So we're going to get a planning grant at Town Green to assess that, and then see where we go.
That's great.
That's awesome. So, all right, this is sort of the negative question. I read a story a couple days ago about something to do with the batteries for electric cars, and that there's slave labor in Africa that is actually that's mining one of the minerals that's used for the cars. Do you know anything about that?
I wouldn't say that a high percentage of vehicles sold in the United States are sourced from child labor in Africa, but it does exist, particularly for cobalt, which is one of the items in there. But the good news is, and again, the law is already going to force that to change. More and more of the minerals are going to have to come from North America or from countries that we've got free trade agreements with, and there will be provisions for that. But the most important thing is the car makers are trying to avoid cobalt or avoid that situation. So they're looking at different, I'm not a chemist, but there's all kinds of chemistry involved in making the batteries. And so, there's a lithium phosphate battery that doesn't have cobalt, and it's almost as good as, works almost as good, and it's cheaper. So Tesla and some other car companies are making those, and so we're going to see more and more alternative battery chemistries. There was another one recently in the Boston Globe. The research and development in that area is going very huge. And then ultimately, once we get enough electric cars on the road, there will be that recycling I talked about, which is we'll be able to avoid that situation that you're talking about.
This fellow's been,
Yep.
Your web address?
greenenergyconsumers.org, www.greenenergyconsumers.org.
Do either of you have any comment about the gas-fired peaker plant that's being built in Peabody?
Yeah, we were, we were not part of the conversation, but a lot of residents were like, what can Revision do? Surely there's some combo of utility scale, solar and battery. We wouldn't be the provider for that, but conceptually that is exactly what they should have done. So that peaker, unfortunately, they got to a kind of a I don't know if it wasn't really a point of no return. They looked at it that way, that the cost that they had already sunk into the analysis, and the analysis was done 5 years ago, where this just wouldn't have been feasible to do with the battery technology then. So the battery can be used to shave that peak demand. That's the whole purpose of that peaker plant. It just comes on in those hot summer days when everybody's air conditioner's on at 3 in the afternoon. Solar and storage, that's what it's designed for, right? Is to capture that late afternoon, shift the load, power everybody into the evening until things settle down. So that certainly could have been the solution, and that's, I think, right at the time that was happening, there was a great success story happening in Arizona. Similar utility faced with brand new peaker plant. That's going to be just a sunk cost for everybody. All the taxpayers are going to be paying that maintenance for the next 20 years versus, a little bit more now on something that is achieving the same result for a much lower cost, yeah. But it seems that there's no return from that peaker plant.
If you go to our website, we have a program called Shave the Peak, and you sign up for that, and we'll send you a text when the grid is getting to a certain point. We'll remind you of ways that you can try to reduce your electricity consumption. It's primarily a summer thing, and unfortunately we can't pay you because the utility's not paying us. We're doing that to try to educate folks and to show the utilities they should be doing more of that in order to avoid the situation of having to need the Peabody peaker plant. But in the long run, the answer is more storage to be coupled with solar in the summertime and offshore wind in the wintertime is the best way. In the future, we're going to have a larger winter peak than the summer peak when we have heat pumps. But storage to deal with those situations will be available.
So before we take an additional, on that comment?
Yeah, just on that one, just talking about residential storage. So, Massachusetts was the first state in the country to go beyond a pilot program and actually designed this into the state utility efficiency plans. So where National Grid and Eversource and Unitil, the major investor-owned utilities, created a program where a residential backup battery that's just on standby, it's replacing a generator when the power goes out. Otherwise, it's not doing anything. So when the grid is live, that battery is just sitting there topped off. And so they created a program where the battery can, through software, intelligently talk to the grid, help shave those peaks, and actually earn you a little bit of income that does bring down the net cost of the installation of the battery.
I can't help it, but within about 5 years, no more than 10, the electric car you buy will have what's called bidirectional charging.
Right.
And so if today was hot, I could have gotten a signal from the utility, and instead of charging my car, I could have discharged my car into the grid instead of the Peabody peaker plant. And right now, the Ford 150 Lightning can do that. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 can do that. And Nissan's big into it. You're going to almost every car, and that's going to make your EV a better buy, right?